So, there are two different types of tests that you are going to take as a college student. The first type of test is an objective test. And you can see in this graphic here, we have right or wrong. What does it mean to take an objective test? What is an objective test? This means that there is a definite right or wrong answer. So think about multiple choice, true or false, maybe even something that's fill in the blank, where you have to, fill in the correct term, something like that. Um, when you have an objective test, you want to make sure that you kind of preview the test before starting. Sometimes with online tests, that's not always possible. It doesn't let you, move forward to see everything. But if you have the opportunity, try to review that test before starting. See how many multiple choice questions you're going to have. Are there any true false? Are there any fill in the blank? Something like that. Please make sure that you also follow the instructions. That's probably one of the biggest things that I see students struggle with when they take an objective test, is they miss very key instructions. Maybe, for that overall section of the test, or, maybe for that one question. And begin with your strengths. Do the things that you know you are good at. So if you know that you're good at true or false because there's a 50-50 chance that you can get it right, then start with that. Again, if the test allows you, I know that there are some online tests that you will take where that's just not possible for you to begin wherever you want. You have to kind of go in the order that the instructor wants you to. So it really depends on the type of test that you're taking and how the instructor has set it up for you. When you are taking an objective test, you want to look for key words. Look for words that are familiar from the class, meaning the lectures, or the text, right? Things that your instructors emphasized, okay? Those instructor cues that you have been looking for. Or maybe there are bolded or italicized terms from the textbook that you recognize. Also look for absolute and in between qualifiers. And so what are absolutes? Those are things that are kind of like extreme, it's extreme language, right? And when extreme language is used, those answers are more often false. Okay. So like in a multiple choice, you could kind of eliminate those answers that have these absolutes in them. Um, or if it's true or false, it's more likely going to be the answer false. So these extreme words that you want to look out for are always, never, everyone, no one, everything, and nothing. And those aren't all of them, those are just some examples. But as you can see, it kind of takes you from, one extreme to the other. And so sometimes you're sort of quote unquote being tricked when absolutes are used. And so that might be one of the things that you want to look for either in the questions or the answers. In between qualifiers are more likely true or more likely the correct answers. So if you see answers that have the words sometimes, few, many, seldom, mostly, frequently, right? Those are not as extreme. They're in between, right? Almost like wishy-washy, if you will. Um, most of the time, those are going to be your correct answers or your true answers. However, that is not always the case. And so, that's why you have to kind of go through the process of elimination, or you have to make sure that you know you're reading really well. And it also depends on, the instructor and how they've written the test, things like that. Okay. When you are selecting your answers for an objective test, use the two-handed strategy. Try to answer it in your head first. Instead of, circling it on the paper or clicking the button, um, if you, without looking at the answers, you can answer the question, you know, if that answer like shows up in the multiple choice, trust that your gut is right. Don't second guess yourself. A lot of students who have test anxiety really struggle with that, where they tend to trust their gut. Even though they know the correct answer, they start to sort of second guess themselves. So if the answer pops up in your head and then you see it right in the multiple choice, trust that you're right there. Okay. Try to answer the easy questions first. These are sure points, right? You know that you're going to get these ones correctly, and it can kind of act as a warm up for you for some more difficult questions. If you come across questions where maybe you're not 100% sure, um, try to eliminate the wrong answers, right? If you see those absolute qualifiers, kind of evaluate and see if you can eliminate those ones. And try to select the best possible answer. Maybe there are two right answers. I've heard a lot of nursing students say that this is often how their tests are presented to them. Is they have to pick the best possible answer. There's more than one right answer, and it feels like they're being tricked, right? Many of you may feel like that. But go with the one that you think is the most correct. And that can be really frustrating for a lot of students. And I totally get that. Just do your best with it. You can always, well, no, I shouldn't say always, right? That's an absolute. Sometimes you can skip your questions and come back. Um, like I said before, with some of those online tests, that might be a little bit more difficult because you can't, move ahead. Or once you select an answer, however the test is set up, it's not going to let you go back. Your answer is sort of locked in. Um, for our Learn 11 quizzes, you should be able to see everything at once, right? So skip it and come back. Maybe, write it down on a sticky note that you need to go back to it so that you don't forget it before you submit your test. Poorly worded questions. This is another thing, that you want to look out for on tests. And I'll be honest, I've been in education a long time. I have written a lot of tests and quizzes, and I have written some poorly worded questions. And my students, especially my middle school and high school students, they love to call me out, when my grammar wasn't immaculate, or when I had a typo or, something like that. But I did always appreciate when my students asked for clarification, because, as you guys are very tired as college students, your instructors, they have a lot to do too. And so sometimes when we're writing tests, there's some oversight. And we can word things poorly, or maybe it makes sense in our brain, but it doesn't make sense to our students. And so it's okay to ask your instructors to clarify for you if that's possible. I know with, online tests, that might be a little bit more difficult because you're not necessarily sitting in a classroom, and you can't stand up and go ask your instructor the question. But if I were you, I would, if you had, a question that you thought was poorly worded, maybe email your instructor after the fact. There may be times when the instructor will go, oh, yeah, that is a really poorly worded question. This percentage of students got it wrong. I'll give you guys that point. I have certainly done that before as an instructor, and I know many other instructors who will kind of do the same thing. So it never hurts to ask. Okay. And also, it's not going to, at least for me, it won't hurt my feelings if you tell me, that something was not worded, it was a confusing wording. It won't hurt my feelings if you tell me that. That actually is really beneficial to me so that I can fix it for future students, and I really appreciate that. Um, with poorly worded questions, you're going to want to eliminate the double negatives. So the two nots, right? Two negatives make a positive, right? If we're using some math here. So look for double negatives, eliminate those, so that you really understand what the question is asking you. And when there's a double negative, right, it's actually a positive. And so you don't want to answer the question as a not question, right? Which of these is not the right answer? Also, like I said, look for grammatical clues, excuse me. Maybe with parentheses or, just in the way the question is worded, you might be getting a hint on what the answer is. And so, how I mentioned, it's really important to read the instructions. You want to make sure that you are doing that and looking for grammatical cues. Okay. So, what if you need to guess on an objective tests? What are some good choices to guess with? Sentences that have in between qualifiers. We've already talked about that one. Um, a lot of the times, if there is an all of the above option, usually it's there because that's the right answer. So if you have to guess and you really don't know, go with that one. If the answer is worded positively, whereas all the other answers are worded kind of in a negative, they have negative words in them, like not or none, then usually the positive one is going to be correct. If you have an answer that has more information than the other answers, that's a good choice to guess with. And sometimes you will see tests that, give you an option that's like B and C, or B or C, right? Where you could choose either one. And so instructors will kind of throw those in there. And it really means that there are two right answers. And so if you see something like that, that's pretty good indication to you that you can guess that one correctly. Please don't choose when you have to guess the ones with absolute qualifiers like we talked about before. Very rarely will instructors have an answer that is truly none of the above. And so, try to avoid those ones. Don't, kind of interchange it with all of the above. Typically, there is going to be a right answer, and they want you to identify that right answer. If it has negative wording in it, don't guess that one. Funny answers. I would do this often with my middle school and high school students, just to kind of give them one to do a process of elimination. And then, I'd always be surprised when students actually, chose the funny answer. And more often than not, A is not the correct answer. A lot of instructors want you to read past multiple choice letter A. And so they won't put that as the first one. Now, in this realm of online tests, there are features where everything kind of gets shuffled around. And so for each student, it's going to be different. The computer kind of generates that for the instructor. And so you kind of have to keep that in mind with online tests, that you're not usually going to have, the letter choice A be the correct answer, but sometimes that might be true.